It's Thursday, February 26, 2015 at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Marketing Live. I'm your guest host, Kylie Larson from M. Stoner, and today on Marketing Live we'll be speaking with two campus administrators who work day to day to identify and cultivate student leaders on campus. We'll explore the challenges of recruiting diverse leadership, and we'll discuss ways student affairs professionals can identify underrepresented leaders. The participants will also talk about ways they can help their student leaders grow during their time on campus and conflicts that may inherently arise during that growth. Both participants will bring stories from campus and offer insights on the future of student affairs and how leadership impacts marketing. Marketing Live is part of the Higher Ed Live network, offering viewers direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. We have two of them today. Live webcasts allow viewers to share knowledge and participate in our Twitter discussions and around the most important issues in the industry. All episodes of Marketing Live are free and accessible in our video archives at higheredlive.com and in podcast format on iTunes. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. M. Stoner is offering free 30-minute print consultations during the month of March. Interested in having your suite of admissions or advancement materials reviewed? We're tweeting out a link where you can learn more and sign up. Marketing Live is sponsored by FormStack, an online form builder and your go-to tool for higher ed website conversions. FormStack makes it easy for marketers to create branded, mobile-ready web forms without writing code. Build donation forms, application forms, event registrations, and more with the web's only Section 508 compliant form builder. Interact with your audience on social media using FormStack's Facebook tab or social media autofill features. For even more conversions, use FormStack's robust analytics data to refine your form. FormStack also partners with popular marketing applications so you can nurture your leads more effectively. Visit formstack.com to learn more about the ways FormStack can double your response rates and increase conversions today. And now, I'd like to welcome our two guests for this afternoon. Danielle Burke is Residence Director at Northwestern University. In her position, Danielle supervises 14 undergraduate resident assistants and 1 graduate student assistant, helping them to oversee 600 college residents in 4 buildings. Her buildings include 3 residential colleges, the College Interfaith Hall, substance-free housing, and gender-open housing. Her day consists of various meetings, committees, conduct reviews, and one-on-ones with her staff. Danielle also advises, directs, and indirectly each hall's government or executive board. Chris Vatter of St. Olaf University is Director in Student Activities and Buntrick Commons. Did I say that right? Buntrick. Okay. In her position, Chris oversees the daily operations of the Student Commons and works with a variety of student organizations, including the Student Government Association. She's also the coordinator for the Campus Week 1 program. So, welcome, guys, or gals. Thank you for joining me today. So what we're going to be talking about, as I mentioned, is just the experiences of being a student-led group. How do you grow student leaders, how you find student leaders, and how you work with your marketing teams to talk about student leadership on campus. For those of you watching along, please don't hesitate to ask questions using the hashtag HigherEdLive. I'll do my best to ask questions of Danielle and Chris as they come in. For now, let's just get started. I'd like to hear from each of you your own perspective on how you interact with student leaders on campus. So, Chris, do you want to start us off?
So the question is, how do I interact with student leaders?
Yeah, just a little bit more depth from your intro about how you day-to-day work with student leaders.
Well, day-to-day student leader interaction. For example, this morning I already did a couple of check request approvals for a couple of student organizations that needed to pay a speaker or pay their league dues for the spring, for their spring competition. So I do manage, in a sense, their financial operation. We require all our student organizations to have their funding on campus, and then what we do is we just try to verify that they have the funds in their unit before we send it over to the business office so that they don't go into the negative. And so they have to come in and they speak with either myself or my assistant director, and we just make sure they have the funds, and then we send the paperwork through. So on those little opportunities, I'm always like, okay, so are you currently listed in the student org database? Are you getting the emails? What do you got going on? What's new and exciting? We also have paper and markers and things for the student orgs in our office to make big banner posters, so they have to come here to get that before they can hang it up and get them. We have improved those and put those up. So just kind of a random smattering of various things every day. I just also attended a meeting about our spring break service, one of our spring break service trips. This morning we are sending 120 students to serve Boulder, Colorado for flood relief.
Okay.
So those students are getting their buses ready and all their activities and fun things, getting
Great.
the orientations ready for all those participants.
Great, thank you. Danielle, tell me more about how you interact with student leaders on a day-to-day.
Sure. With working with kind of a variety of groups in the residential setting, I get to have a lot of different interactions with students, whether that be through my RAs coming in for their one-on-one meetings or just stopping by while they're in the building. Luckily, the building my office is in has a dining hall in it, so a lot of them will stop by either before or after lunch just to say hi and even have some of those just quick but meaningful conversations, which can be really fun to just find out what's going on in their lives. And then also I work most directly with the hall government of the building that I live and work in, but then also work with the exec boards of the 3 other buildings I oversee. So I've gotten to work with them some on building team dynamics, working on those kind of leadership skills. With my staff this year, we focused a lot on Strengths Quest, so kind of building leadership in that way. But a lot of interactions mix between those formal meeting settings and then also the more informal, just when they'll stop by to come chat, or a lot of times they want me to go get my puppy because they want to play with her and meet me. So
part of the your life is really intertwined with your job when you're when you're leading student leaders.
Definitely.
What are some ways that your institutions support student leadership? So Chris, you mentioned there seems to be like a budget for student activities, for student organizations. What are some other ways that student leadership is supported on your campus?
We are open to pretty much anything for student orgs to do. We at this point have over 260 student orgs on campus. We have 3,000 students, so I think it's a fairly high number of student orgs. So that means there's a bunch of students out there doing stuff. They're all looking to make their mark and find their niche on campus. So we support student leaders by providing funding for conference attendance for their students, to the organization itself, to either provide their awareness activities or just fun activities. A lot of students orgs are traveling, they're debating, they're competing. Our career center is huge right now, and they're providing all kinds of different opportunities for student leaders to get out there and show their skills to potential employers. They're doing a lot of connecting with alumni, which is really ramped up in the last couple of years, is connecting our current students with alumni and making those connections in terms of taking their leadership stuff and turning it into resume, turning it into career. And we definitely are in that mode too right now, and working with all of our student leaders that we work with individually on our committees to talk about what they've learned over the course of the year, how can they translate that, take their strengths. We did a strengths activity last week, Friday as well. Use those strengths and translate that into resume, translate that into talking points for interviews, for interview time, so that they can take that leadership stuff and actually use it for career.
So one thing that jumps out from what you're saying, Chris, is there are a lot of stories you're hearing. You're hearing a lot about, you mentioned your students are connected to your alumni, so you're hearing those stories. You're hearing your alumni come back and talk about how that student leadership impacted kind of where they are today. And you also mentioned helping your students find their strengths and connecting that to their resume and where they're going, and so you're hearing kind of about that in process. Are there any times when you're sharing those stories with maybe your web team or a marketing team or your admissions team to get those stories out?
I've had on my to-do list to make a web page for my office for I don't even know how long. As long as I've been given a web page to do, I guess, to put those stories on there to highlight those quote-unquote success stories, or how those student government or student leadership stuff translated into jobs and fun stuff beyond college. And when I was thinking about getting ready for this, I was thinking about that same thing, like, I need to get that website done. On top of the other website that I need to do, and the other website that I need to do. But yeah, that is kind of, will really be up to me to do that, to showcase what we do here. We aren't using things like Collegiate Link or OrgSync, where I think some of the other campuses might be using, and that kind of lends itself to those kind of self-promotion things, I think. I'm not sure because I don't use it, but that's what I see as possibly an advantage to those campuses that are using those software packages. And we, dabble, we consider using those as well every now and again. But yeah, we absolutely need to do a website to show the student that worked in the pizza joint went to China after he graduated and helped someone start a pizza joint. Like,
That's a really cool story.
Totally weird and absolutely cool story that only the people that work in the kitchen ever get to hear, because I tell the folks that work in the kitchen. This is one of those weird stories.
About those stories, yeah. I think I hear a lot about marketing wanting more of those stories. Danielle, are there any of the channels on your campus ways that you can tell those RA, those grad assistant, those student living stories? Because I know from having been an RA, some of the craziest stories, the good ones, the positive ones, come out of residential life. So how do you connect your student leaders with people that tell their stories? Or do you have any ideas for it?
Yeah, this is something I think that I especially have been thinking about a lot this year, working on kind of a social media plan. My area does have its own Twitter right now, which is something we've been trying to beef up. We're going to actually have a contest pretty soon to get more followers, and then work on developing that content to make sure it's meaningful, that they're following us and we're not just taking space on their feed. So one way I've had in the staff submits weekly reports, and part of their weekly report there's a section that says, is there anything you'd like us to highlight on Twitter? And so giving them an opportunity to share their voice as well, but also highlighting some of the accomplishments. Like we had 2 of our RAs performed at the Gender and Sexuality Resource Center grand opening, some spoken word and slam poetry, so we were able to kind of highlight that they were being involved in doing that through that Twitter, and it got retweeted by some of the other organizations on campus as well to kind of spread that word of what they're doing. Also, internally within ResLife, we've started featuring a different RA every other week in kind of an email blast that goes to some people in the division, but mostly internally within the RA staff. But I think that's a great opportunity to get that out to more people as well. We also have a marketing person on staff within the residential services team, so really working to utilize her skills and talents to try to work and promote our staff and what they're doing as well, because I mean they're doing amazing things for sure.
For sure. Those are really concrete suggestions. I liked the suggestion about asking your RAs directly if there's anything they want shared out that week. Mm-hmm. I hadn't heard that one before, and that's really key to collecting stories that maybe you haven't even heard yet.
Yeah, it's been really fun. We have one RA on staff who's really into dreams, so every week he wants hashtag dream big, live huge on there. So we've kind of turned that into a question, asking the residents what their dreams are and how they can embody that idea of dream big and live huge. We've also had people just want to push out programs. We've had RAs that just want to tell students, hang in there, the snow will end one day. So it's been really fun.
That's cool. What is your hashtag for the residential life? Or not your hashtag, your handle?
At JIFLove, it's J1F and then LOVE.
Okay, something to check out. I want to transition a little bit and think about how we identify those student leaders on our campus that feed us these awesome stories and that help kind of support the mission of the campus. So, Chris, can you tell me a little bit about the leaders that come into your office every day? Are they always the students who raise their hand? Do you ever have to go dig up individuals? How do you find the student leaders that you work with?
Well, like I said, with 260 orgs, there's people out there all over the place doing great things. We don't necessarily hear all about them all the time, but if they come in, we're identifying, we're saying hi, have some popcorn. Obviously, popcorn and candy are big around here, but in particular this period of time, it's student government election season. So out here, there's piles of flyers that are getting ready to get rolled out in terms of the marketing plan to get people invited and excited about running for the different executive positions on Student Senate. And at this time in particular, we have to make a special effort and be very cognizant about going out there and looking for those students that haven't necessarily been involved or are looking for their in. I also had a conversation with our academic success center Back in January, I think it was, they've identified a handful of students that still haven't connected yet. They're underclassmen that, they don't go to stuff. They're not interested in going to stuff because they're going to want to go alone. They haven't figured out who their friend base is, and so we're trying to figure out with them what can we do. How can we find our current leaders? How do we identify current leaders that are willing to reach that hand out to those students that need a leg up, to that don't want to go alone but don't want to be left behind. And then we have to convince those students to try something new. So we're kind of trying to balance that and dance that, make that it's a dance for sure. But anyway, back to elections. When the entire student body gets to vote on who's in charge of programming and who's in charge of the political programming for next year and who's in charge of student government and diversity programs and all that stuff, that can be scary for people to even attempt, because it's kind of a lot of responsibility. I mean, it is. So we have to go out there and say, if you haven't been involved, here's what it's about. I mean, we hope that students are going to rise up through the committees and kind of have a comfort level and be really willing to take on the lead, but that doesn't always happen. Our students here are very driven, they're very committed, they're busy doing stuff, and they have a million things on their plate. So there are days, and this is one of them, these are the days that we have to go out there and start tapping people on the shoulder or tapping folks that we do know or we know maybe marginally and say, if you don't want to do it, maybe you know someone who does. And
when you say you go out there, are you physically going out there? Are you posting flyers? Are you tweeting? How are you going out there to those students?
Lots of flyers, a lot of Facebook stuff. We haven't really figured the niche of Twitter here yet. I don't think we've got a lot of tweeting happening. I mean, I'm trying to do it, and I noticed I just got back from NACA Nationals. There's a lot of tweeting going on. I don't know that it's as big here still. I think Instagram and Facebook are still the two bigger things that are still on this campus, and I'm not sure. Danielle seems to be tweeting more, and that's awesome. I would love for us to be tweeting more, and I do, but I have a few people on campus following me, but I definitely have a bunch of people out on the planet following me as well. But just for example, last week I was out. I sat on a couch next to one of our students, and I said, "What are you doing next year?" He's like, "Well, I'm going to be in Res Life. I'm going to do this." And I said, "Well, we need someone on our week 1 committee. What are you doing?" He's like, "Nah, really, I think I got my niche. I'm going to do stuff." And I said, "Well, here's what I need." He goes, "Well, I'll ask around. I'll ask my residents. I'll see if I can find someone." I said, "Perfect. That's all I know. That's all I need. Thank you." So you have to go out there and you have to sit down next to people, and you have to just kind of say, "Here's what's happening," and take the fear out of it and make it sound like it's going to be fun, because it will be fun in the long run. But
it's good for them.
Yeah, but you got to go out there and you just got to sit down.
Yep. Danielle, one of the things that I find is that, that Chris touched on this a little bit, that there are the students that are in your office that are ready to go from day one, and then there are the students that you have to go find, that you have to tap on the shoulder, that you have to reach out through other people. How do you find those people? How do you support those people? How do you encourage them at Northwestern to be part of student leadership in Res Life?
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, I'm fortunate with Living In to have access to a lot more students as well. So for me, something that's big in my life is focusing on women's leadership as well, and knowing that we have so many women in college, yet the numbers of women that run for offices are a lot lower statistically. So I'm really tuned in to when I'm speaking with college women who mention even a small leadership role that's happening in something they're involved in that maybe they aren't even thinking about running for, trying to encourage them to just try it, to run it, and let me know what I can do to help, if that's doing mock interviews, if that's helping with campaigning, if that's looking at kind of their goals and what they want in those organizations as well. Also kind of reaching out and really collaborating with our campus partners, having email blasts go out to the student affairs listservs, having them say, let us know who you think are these students that would be really great in these roles that maybe we don't know, that maybe aren't the ones putting their hands up and like jumping at the opportunity, so we can reach out. One thing that's always been really important to me too is the current staff voice. Something I did at a previous institution when I was in charge of selection and training, and that we've carried on here at Northwestern as well, is having kind of recruitment cards that we give to the current staff to then give out to other people on campus as well. I know when I was a sophomore in undergrad, I received one about being an RA, and it just really added to that feeling of somebody believes in me and somebody thinks I can do this position, and so maybe I can. And then, it's been cool to see kind of the return of students who then come into the interviews and have that confidence saying that my RA told me I'd be good at this, and I wasn't even thinking about applying before, but they want me to, and so now I think it's going to be this great opportunity. So that's really fun. But also it's, potentially going to those various student org meetings that maybe there's a group on campus that you're not seeing as much in your applications, going to their meetings, talking to them about what they could gain from this additional leadership opportunity as well. And so I think, just kind of reaching out across campus and looking in places that we don't typically expect, but also really empowering the current staff to encourage people as well.
And the cards that you said you guys use that you had also received as an undergrad, are they literally like business card size? What do they look like, and what's the messaging that?
Well, and it depends. So at my last institution, we had themes every year for training, and so the one year that it was Dr. Seuss themed, we made it was in a crazy font and crazy colors, printed out on paper onto a different, like 3x5 just note card that we handed out, and it was a little poem that went through the theme about, like, I don't even remember what all it said, but something about honesty, integrity, compassion, creativity. Like, we believe it's all in you, but it rhymed.
But yeah.
No, and then it had the information about like when applications were due as well on those cards, and information about info sessions. Here at Northwestern, we have kind of more just an overarching theme of being a leader and being a resident assistant. So the cards more just go with kind of the branding of the department, but we do give out cards that students can pass out to each other that have information about the info sessions, application due dates, kind of all of those pieces as well. And then we've typically also left a little spot where the current staff could write a note to the student saying, hey, I think this would be great for you, like, come join our team.
Okay.
It's a great idea.
That's a really great idea. Yeah, I just like to get the specifics because I know that people watching will be asking later when they see videos, what does it exactly look like and how do you use it? So specifics are good. Chris, one of the things that I've been thinking about after you said this is student government time on campus for you is that seems like a prime place to have challenges in terms of diversity, in terms of your quieter students aren't likely to run. Maybe you have certain groups that aren't as prominent on campus that don't feel like they would be elected. You're really putting yourself in a vulnerable position when you run. So can you talk a little bit about being an advisor, and is diversity a challenge? How do you address that challenge? How do you talk about that on campus?
Well, it's absolutely a challenge. No denying. We're a campus of 3,000, and our percentage of diverse students is going up. It's rising. Our percentage of international students is going up, and it's rising. But it's, there's no balance. We're still struggling to get the diverse voices heard on this campus. It's just there. It's what it is. It's where we are. And so when I talked to my exec team last night, we had our meeting, and as we're rolling this stuff out, we've got the posters, we've got the stuff. I'm like, okay, remember to tell your teams anybody can do this, and remember to make a point of talking to the folks that you think are interested or you maybe don't think are interested. Just make sure that everyone understands that they have the capacity to do this. Something that I was told a long time ago, I don't even remember where I heard it, but you hire for attitude, you can train for skill. So as long as someone has the desire and the attitude and the want to be in and do things, we can give them the skills they need. You don't have to have all the skills of how to be a coordinator or a marketing person or a president, a student body president, because nobody has those skills till they do it. You don't have to have them. We will help you through it. We will help you find your way. And so I make a point of telling them, you have to go out there. You have to talk to people you've never talked to before. You talk to your friend, you make sure they talk to their friends, and you make sure you talk to people you've never met that are just walking. When we do a lot of tabling, I'm not sure if a lot of people still do that, but where you put the table out there, you put the table cover on, you got your candy, and you say, here's what I'm doing. And anybody try to spark the interest of somebody different. And I'm also in a position where our multicultural office is right next door to mine. This office is right next door, so we can walk right across the hallway and go in there and just sit down every couple of hours and talk to the folks that are in there and just spark the question. Have you thought about this? Did you know this is coming? Did you know it's happening? And just see what happens and go from there.
I love that quote. You hire for attitude, you can train for skill. That's perfect.
Mm-hmm. And you can use that over and over. It doesn't matter what committee, what position, what job. That's what it all boils down to.
That's great. Danielle, one of the questions I think about is if you do reach maybe a quieter soul or somebody who hasn't been in leadership positions before or somebody who doesn't come from a background that's chock full of cultural capital in this area, how do you mentor leadership? How do you kind of guide them into becoming a student leader? It's a really hefty question, sorry.
Yeah,
we can start with the beginning. Like you have a new sophomore. Where do you start?
Yeah, I think it's providing kind of that foundation for them too, making sure they feel comfortable in their role and they know what they're getting into. I think in that aspect, we really hit the ground running in training, especially in the Res Life side in the summer before they come in. So I think it's building that foundation and that confidence, letting them know that that you believe in them and that it does take all kinds of students to be leaders on campus as well, and that they're going to be the people that people like them can connect to too, and then want to be, and then want to develop their leadership skills as well. So focusing on those team dynamics, I think that's one reason I really enjoy strengths, to kind of show that maybe the things that they thought wouldn't have been good in leadership are what makes them powerful as well, and then talk about how they can utilize those and leverage them in different areas. But yeah, I think just really working on building that foundation so they feel comfortable in the role they're doing. And then, a lot of times it is a lot of one-on-one meetings, a lot of even practicing how to have some of those conversations with their residents, especially if it's a topic that they're not comfortable discussing to begin with, that some role-playing, some more research and kind of education on the topic too, and just helping them to and highlighting what they're doing well, for sure, helping them to see all the ways that they're making a difference and doing a really great job.
I like the idea of positive reinforcement, just repeatedly mentioning you did this really well, here's why it was a job done well, and I think it builds confidence in new leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, what are some of the ways on your campus that you've kind of mentored or built leadership from individuals who maybe weren't natural leaders or weren't the ones to raise their hands first?
Wow. Well, I know that we just sort of, in our student employment program in the student center, we have tons of people that want to work here. They want to work in the building. And you start here working in the building at the information center at the desk. And I know that people don't necessarily take their student work jobs as leadership development sometimes. I know that we do, but not everybody else sees it that way. And I think that it surprises some students when we say, oh, you seem to be doing a great job, you're dependable, you're awesome, would you think about being a manager next year? And a lot of times they take a step back and go, oh, sure, never thought of that, and didn't think I was ready, didn't think I could do it. But then it's so fun to watch them just do. And then to understand how important it is and how that peer mentoring, peer leadership thing is to them as a human and to other students. A lot of times students don't even realize that they're being managed or being managed. Well, they don't necessarily get that a building manager is a student manager, is a peer, just like they are. They're a student as well, and it takes them to be even being asked the question, would you consider being a manager, to understand that, oh, they are my boss. Oh, I never really figured that out. So I just think it's fun to watch that happen. I don't know that I have a magic bullet, but I do know that a lot of times students just need the opportunity and to have that door swung open for them to even see that it's a possibility. And I don't know if I answered that question.
You did.
Okay, sweet.
Let me ask you, on the flip side, have you ever had a student raise their hand for leadership who you knew wasn't ready? And how do you
Oh, yeah.
handle that?
It's easier to do if I'm in a supervisory position with a work position than it is when they've gone through an election process and have been elected. Danielle's laughing at me. So, if a student has gone through an election process and has been elected by the student body, they are still elected and they're still going to have to take on that position. And so, then it becomes myself as an advisor. They don't report to me as a supervisor. They actually sort of report to the student body president and vice president, but anything that ends up having to be disciplined has to go through the entire Senate, and it can be complicated. That's where you end up. That's where you go from shifting from advising to coaching to trying to get across some things, make sure that their peers understand what's happening, understand, that's where the relationship between myself and the student body president and vice president is key to show the weaknesses and where things need to be changed, things need to be fixed. And then if discipline has to happen, and then help them through that discipline process, which can be painful. It just can be painful.
Totally.
We didn't even have a discipline process in our Senate until about 3 years ago. So it took me about 9 years to convince the Senate to come up with something, because we had so many wildly uncomfortable things happen that we couldn't get out of, because there was no way to get out of it.
So creating a formal structure for dealing with
students and peers need that. You can't be vague. When you're a supervisor, when I'm a supervisor, I'm old now. I've done this a while. I can be frank. I can be honest, and it's easier for me than it was 20 years ago. So when it's a peer situation, you've got a 19-year-old that has to discipline a 20-year-old, or you've got a 19-year-old that has to discipline a 21-year-old, make it even worse or more challenging. They don't necessarily have those skills, and that's not a comfort piece for them. And oh my God, it's scary. So we had to come up with a structure that you could at least function within, so you could at least say, here's what it says on paper, here's what's happening, here's what needs to change.
That makes sense.
Otherwise, it has to go to the Senate, and this is what's going to happen, or
Yeah.
But it took a long time to convince people to do that. Anyway.
Danielle, what about on your campus? Have you had to deal with students that maybe weren't ready for leadership when they raised their hand, or students who were in leadership positions that then had struggles, and how have you dealt with those situations?
Definitely. I think I definitely agree that it can be easier in the supervisory capacity than the advisory, because with some of the groups I advise, if they don't want to listen to me, technically they don't have to. That I can tell them that I think this is the way they should go if they want their organization to be successful, but sometimes that's not the case. I know, like all students, Northwestern students are very overextended and involved on campus, and so one of the struggles that we have seen, even more so than maybe they're not ready, is they're not ready with the time management piece, that they want to be the president or the vice president of everything they're involved in. So having to talk about, maybe we need to take a step back in this role and kind of look at your values and your priorities and see which organizations you have time to devote to the higher leadership, and where there's the value in being a member in others as well. So I know I've had conversations with students about what it means to be a good member of an organization and how you can still contribute in those areas. I think looking in the supervisory capacity, that again, there's a lot of coaching. Sometimes it does have to lead to more of the formal disciplinary process, which can never be fun, but honestly, I hope it never does get fun. So scared. But I think it's really just talking about those values and that commitment, and kind of a lot of times for me, reframing back to, why did you apply? And at times it's been, they used to submit videos during their application. So I've, with one student, we looked at their video again to kind of re-energize and think about, this is why I wanted to do this, but then I took on all these other things and then maybe wasn't ready to commit as much to this position as I thought. So working to kind of reframe and see with those values pieces as well. And then, yeah, I think sometimes people get in over their head and it's not the position they wanted. So unfortunately, I've had some staff who ultimately ended up needing to resign, or some members on hall government who realized that they just couldn't do the position that they wanted to, and it was in over their head. So then it's also working with the rest of the staff or the rest of the team to kind of repair that void that's there, find a new member, and then welcome them into the team right away and keep moving forward.
That's
For a lot
really
of students, I think a lot of students, it's hard to let go. It's hard to
Mhm.
acknowledge that I got too much going on, or this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and they just need that freedom to be able to say it's okay. We'll find someone else. It's okay.
Mhm.
It's okay. And that's a lot of times all they need to hear.
Yeah, I think part of the appeal of college and of college organizations is you can do it all, you can be anything, you can start new, but then you realize you really can't do it all. You can choose from among it all, but you do have to make choices about what fits the leadership style, and your roles are really about teaching students how to make those choices. Tell me about your older, more seasoned student leaders, how you train them to find younger student leaders. How do you talk about identifying student leaders? Because you do need to give them some parameters or some ideas for how they can go out and cultivate younger students. So, Chris, do you want to start and tell about, maybe you ask someone on current student government to find somebody new. How do you talk about that?
Yeah, like I said, we just see who's already doing the things that are similar, or people that are in your classes, or people that a friend of a friend, or folks that, if you are on Twitter, people that are tweeting similar to you or not similar. We don't want always the same, but maybe that has a voice out there that is different. I just, like I said, you have to go either to, first of all, talk to the people that the ones that are in your teams, and then you have to go out and find people that aren't. You just have to. That's just the way it has to be. I don't want you to think that, just because it's your committee, it has to come from the people that you have worked with for a year. It could come from someplace else, and then that's okay. If they've got the fire and they've got the passion, they want to do it, then we'll work with them. Again, back to skills and attitude. A lot of times I think people in the committees, at least in the leadership at the student government level, they feel like, well, no one else is going to do it, so I have to. I'm the one that has the experience. I'm the one. No one else wants to do it, so then I have to. Well, then you end up in that position of ugliness that could be worse. I was the only one that could, so I have to do it, and I don't really want to, but I have the history, or I have the knowledge of what's been done, so therefore I have to be the one to carry it forward. That's not as helpful.
That's not a happy student leadership.
No, that's not how it goes.
Yep.
So, but then student leaders also have to be willing to say it's okay. I don't want them out there going after their, current committee saying, well, you have to do this. You're the only one that, on the flip side, you have to be the one. I've trained you, and I have to do. This has to be my legacy.
Yeah.
Legacy is a big word,
Legacy is a big word, but
we don't want that either. We want new blood. We want to have some fresh ideas. We have to keep up. We have to keep serving the needs of our students.
Danielle, along a similar line, one of the things I was thinking about as I was preparing for this episode is, how do we talk to our student leaders about difficult conversations? So I know parents and students may be asking about alcohol and drugs on campus, sexual assault on campus. You are a director, and you oversee areas that are the substance-free housing and the gender-neutral housing, and so they're probably inherently difficult conversations that your students have to have. How do you train them to have respectful, difficult conversations?
I think the first piece is that education, and also helping to see other people's stories. I know one thing that we've added into our staff meetings this year, with the help of my grad student, Nick, who's wonderful and has a huge lens and passion for social justice and inclusive community work, which has really helped me grow this year. We, in the first quarter of school, each staff meeting, different RAs would bring a story, and it could be whatever they wanted about any piece of their identity that they wanted to share. And for us, we noticed that, one, it brought the team closer together. It made them more willing to have open dialogue, period, that they were able to confront issues on their floors too, because it was more personal to them too. So we definitely had a variety of stories told about a complete range of identities. And so then it was more that it wasn't this fictitious person that then they would need to advocate for or stand up if they heard something that wasn't as it should be on the floor, but that they knew this was my coworker that you could be talking about, or this is my friend on staff. Lately, we've kind of switched to more pro devo type short sessions with discussion afterwards. We did one recently on Islamophobia and talked about the events that have been going on around the country and how that these may be triggers on their floor for students. And we've talked about the Black Lives Matter campaign. We've talked about recently there's a big movement on campus to divest endowment from companies shown to help support Israeli military. So we've been talking about kind of the political aspects of these different things that go on in our world, and also educate them on both sides in kind of a non-biased way, or trying to be, and then really allowing them to have that safe space in our staff meeting to kind of have those discussions and learn from each other, to then be able to either cultivate or even just confront some of those things on their floor as well. And I think that's been really helpful. Again, in training, we talk to them about active listening. We train on having difficult conversations. We obviously train them on how to report sexual assault and what that looks like if someone comes to them, that they are bringing it up the chain, and definitely the difference between confidentiality and privacy. But I think the biggest impact and the biggest thing that's been a big help is that putting kind of a face and a person to some of these stories as well.
I really like the idea of having staff meetings where people tell identity stories. It's a small thing, but it makes a huge difference if you think about it over the course of an academic year. So that's a really great piece of advice.
It's been really...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, it's been really neat to hear their stories, and then just challenge even things that maybe I've thought before, or that questions I've had to be able to have kind of that transparent discussion time with the team as well.
I think it's one of the things that makes higher ed so unique, that, you know, I used to say that in higher ed we had all the conversations that were unacceptable at the dinner table. That was part of daily life, and I think you have to become comfortable with how to talk about those things and how to tell those stories, and I think that your advice is really great. Let me ask you both, Chris, I'll start with you. And what is one story that jumps to mind when I say, give me an example of student leadership gone right? A situation or story of a student or your organization that just really made you proud, or that you maybe repeat. And I know, Chris, you gave one earlier about the student who opened a pizza joint in China. I don't know if you have any others that could be really fun.
That was just a short version. The long version of that story was he got a student job. One of the branches of our student government is Alliance Pause, which was a venue and as well as a kitchen. So in the kitchen we serve pizza, ice cream, all that kind of stuff. And those are all peer managers, all this stuff, and they run the sound, they run the lights, they run the kitchen. So he started as a student worker, that was his job. He worked in the kitchen, and then he got to be a manager. He was a kitchen manager. And then his senior year he ran for and was elected to be the coordinator of the whole space. So then he was a 4-year student. He worked in the pause, was on student government, was one of the elected officials as a student later, and afterwards, and was an Eagle Scout and all this other fun stuff. But afterwards, he he answered there was an ad on Craigslist. Some person put an ad on Craigslist looking for some American people to help him open a pizza joint in China, and he answered the ad and went and he did it. And so it didn't last forever, and I don't even think it was a successful venture, but he did it. He went, and he so it goes to St. Olaf and the student work ethic that we have here, and how we train our student leaders, and it goes to, you know, being a global citizen and being able to just go out there and be adventurous and travel the world. And It's one of those stories. And he's back now. He lives here again. And so I think it lasted maybe 6 or 9 months he spent there, but he at least tried. And it's a really cool story. Another story I think is key to who we are at St. Olaf as well is back when Hurricane Katrina happened, everybody was volunteering, and that was huge. It was in '05, 10 years ago already. We are still doing spring break service trips to the scale that we did for Hurricane Katrina. For Hurricane Katrina, we actually sent 6 buses down to New Orleans. Now we're at 3 buses. We've had 3 buses going out to various places in the U.S. to do service recovery work since then. And that's a legacy to those students that started that trip back in '05. I'm still connected with them on Facebook. They still check in with me, and that's just awesome. And so this morning we had our meeting, and they're going to Boulder. They're going for this year. They're going to go and they're going to do flood relief. There's always going to be some place in the U.S. that had some kind of tragedy happen. And so we still have students that want to do that. They want to give up their spring break. They want to go. They want to serve and have fun, obviously, at the same time. But those are students. We don't send staff on those trips. These are all student-led. Obviously, they're connected via cell phone, but they have found the places to go. They've made the arrangements for the bus. They have the food. They did the churches. Right now, we're scrambling for showers. So if anyone's in Boulder and can offer some showers, that's great.
Public service
do all this work. We are not sending any staff on those buses to chaperone or to be to lead. And one of the things I remember from that first trip, when I didn't go on that trip, I had a 6-month-old at home at the time, but I do remember my dean going on the trip, and he was all ready. He had his suitcase ready, and he was excited. And I had been working with this team and getting the students every week and every day, getting all the stuff ready for the buses. And one of the things that I remember from the day when they loaded the bus was, my dean, he was getting ready. He goes, okay, what do I need to know? What do I need to do? And I said, you don't need to do anything. You need to let them lead. And that was he remembers that story. So at that time he was ready to go and be in charge and just do all the stuff. But he didn't have to, because our students did it. They did it. They were in charge. They knew what they were doing. They had a plan, and they executed it. And he was just there as a backup. And that's, I think, a lot of what we do as student affairs professionals and advising. We're just the backup. Sometimes we need a hammer, and sometimes the hammer needs to be bigger. But for the most part, we are the backup. We have got your back. We're going to give you a little steering. We're going to give you a little direction. But we know we're here to help you get what you want to get done and to watch you do amazing things.
I like, as student affairs professionals, we are the backup. Mm-hmm. That story crystallizes student leadership gone right.
Yep.
Danielle, what about you? Do you have a story that just kind of stands out in your mind as this was leadership gone right?
I think I have a few. A lot of them focus around programming too. I know we, at my previous institution, one of my RAs, just one of the ideas that the whole team came around was talking about kind of body acceptance, and that we named it Born This Way Week, and talking about kind of difference in that lens, and it ended up being a whole series of events that they totally took it and just ran with it. And so we had individual men's and women's events through the week. We had some that were together talking about even the intersection of spirituality versus different body image disorders or eating disorders, things like that, and that really working on that kind of self-love. And then at the end of the week, it was also during when Glee was doing their whole Born This Way thing a few years ago, where all the characters came out with the thing that they were most ashamed of on a white T-shirt. I don't know if anybody used to be a Gleek. But so they really incorporated that as well and kind of picked up on that momentum, and they had the students, instead of wearing the shirts, that they recognized that we might not be at that point yet, which was another thing I was really proud of, that they were in tune enough to realize that students might not be willing to wear a shirt and be that public at that point and at the institution, but they created little paper T-shirts that they strung around and then had a dance party at the end of the week. That I just thought that was a really cool way of looking and finding a need and finding a creative way to talk about a difficult subject. And then other ones that I easily think of are even students I have that are now going into the field of student affairs and just really watching them grow and cultivate further leaders and help grow this field as well. That I know I've had 2 different students in the past that I've known that both worked for me previously that had to step up into kind of that RD role when one was when I took the position at Northwestern. One of my RAs at the time, Heather, really stepped in and led the team, and we were still having one-on-one phone conversations to kind of get through some of that, but she did a great job, and she's finishing up grad school right now and headed to OPE this weekend, actually. So really just great to see how they're going out and changing the world, too.
That is a good story. I do think that student affairs breeds student leaders who then go into student affairs, which just feels really cool and inspiring. Mm-hmm. And Christy, you mentioned being still in contact with some of the students on Facebook, and it's just, it's fun to see kind of the ripple effect.
Mm-hmm. Well, I give them the speech too. I don't know if Danielle, if you, it's spring, it's the time where it's, what are we going to do? And now is the time where when we go to Senate, or if we have a big Senate training, when you get everybody in the same room, you can, and again, talking about putting your Senate experience on a resume and selling that, that's when I tell my story, is how I got involved. And it, you don't go to college thinking you're going to go into student activities, because who's heard of it unless you've been to college? And so you have to give the, the idea that it's actually a job, because I didn't get it right away. It wasn't, and so once you print off the higher ed jobs list, and you can see, you can be a lawyer at college, you can be a nurse at college, you can be a, the rec guy, you can be the person who schedules the room, all these different career possibilities, and still work at a college, then you just see all these light bulbs going, and you're like, really? That would be awesome. They just don't know those things until someone brings it to their attention, just like it was for me.
I had several people when I told them I was going into higher ed being like, they're going to pay you to do that?
Exactly.
So it's a light bulb moment for sure. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I had a couple questions I wanted to ask. If you don't have an answer, that's totally okay, but I think they're really good questions to end on. And one of them is, both of you have mentioned some really interesting ideas and some concepts that you've worked with. Are there any books, articles, movies, or speakers that have inspired your work lately that you think if you're in student affairs, you need to read this or see this? Danielle, I think you're smiling, so I hope that means you have an answer. Do you want to start us off?
Well, it just makes me laugh because my favorite movie of all time is Cool Runnings, and everybody laughs when I say that. They're like, really? Cool Runnings is your favorite movie? But I think just the passion, the commitment to follow through, when they finish the race, come on, you've got to stand up and cheer. And so I think even that movie, I go back to so many quotes about pride, about courage, about just that strength of character to finish the fight, to confront leaders as well. And I'm sure, people I talk to think that I'm putting way too much into a Disney movie, but I just love what it has to talk about friendship and perseverance. So I think that's always something that stayed in the back of my mind. A little more scholarly, some of the things that stick with me. Brene Brown's work on vulnerability has been on my mind a lot in the past few years about what it means, especially in this weird role where I live with them and work with students, that where are those boundaries? Yes, there it is. And how to be transparent and vulnerable, but then where kind of those lines are. And then also I attended leadership as an undergrad in 2007, and some of those are the big things that have kind of always stuck with me and guided me, talking about integrity and having a healthy disregard for the impossible. Have always been at the forefront of when I'm thinking about leadership and just my work every day.
I could not sing Brene's praises enough, so I love hearing that. Those are really good items to mention. Chris, what about you? Are there any books, movies, articles, speakers that you think?
Okay, so I got the book, Daring Greatly, for Christmas. I'm just going to say I got this book. So I think that's what you're talking about, Danielle. And so I had to read the first chapter, the prelude, the pre. I read it like 3 times this morning, just getting ready for this speech or this opportunity, because I would freak myself out for doing it. And so it's all, but I had to, so I read that, literally that first chapter 3 times just today, just to kind of get myself into the, it's okay, we've never done this before. Well, that doesn't mean you can't do it. Okay, we have to try, And it was awesome. So I'm just so glad that I remembered that I had that and was able to bring that back to my to my forefront this morning because that helped me do this project today that I never would have done if Maggie Matson hadn't recommended me. And then Kylie said, whoa, you want to give it a try? So even us old people sometimes can try new things, and it's awesome. It's not so bad. I survived so far. And then my favorite movie, honestly, right now in the grand scheme of my work life is Pitch Perfect, the first one. I'm looking forward to number 2 because the Green Bay Packers are going to be featured in it. Just gonna say, but Pitch Perfect. If you think about the movie, when I was watching that, it was just so funny for me to, having the tabling, the co-curricular fair happening, and people going around and the different personalities at those tables at the co-curricular fair, and then having this woman. I mean, it's student orgs. It's all student orgs. It's all about being a college student and coming into your own and having relationships with others and being in organizations and leadership. I mean, it's funny and it's goofy, but of course my brain is like, oh, but that means something. And so maybe it's just me, but I do think that in terms of my work life, Pitch Perfect is one of those movies that's going to stand out for a while. So I think what I'm hearing is if you're in student affairs and you haven't seen Cool Running, Pitch Perfect, or read Brene Brown's work, you should do that. And Monsters University as well. If I could put my picks are Disney friends. So Monsters University, again, one of those that made me laugh out loud when the beginning. Have you guys seen that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, of course. So at the beginning when, hi, I'm Ray, I'm your RA. Ah. Did you not just laugh out loud when you saw that the first time? Yeah, I did. Yes. So we have a couple minutes left. Very few minutes left, actually. So give me a tweet-sized version of recommendations for future student affairs leaders or people who are just coming into the field. Those people who are in MED programs this spring. They're going to be a student affairs leader on campus next fall. What's your top tweet-worthy recommendation for them? Danielle? Sorry. Start with you first. You don't have to count 40 characters exactly.
Okay. I would say just be willing to jump out there, be ready to mess up, and be excited for all the possibilities.
Perfect. Chris?
I think I'm just going to say that our jobs sometimes they be messy. I think it's our jobs to help students get to the yes. Some people can get hung up on the no's. Even every campus is different, but it's our job to get to the yes and figure out a way to get around the obstacles and help them get to their yes.
Our job to get to the yes. I love that. Okay. Well, thanks as always to our program supporters, mStoner and FormStack. That was our program for today. I'm Kylie Larson. Tune in next week for kickoff of Higher Ed Live's Social Media Month. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to Chris and Danielle for being amazing guests today.
Thank you.
Thank you.